I still remember the exact moment my wedding day stopped feeling like the happiest day of my life. I was standing near the entrance of the chapel with fresh flowers in my hands, still wearing my wedding dress, when my phone vibrated. I smiled, expecting another congratulations message from a friend. Instead, I opened a text that made every joyful sound around me disappear. It simply said that I was fired and that I should consider it a wedding gift. My new director had chosen the one day I could never forget to humiliate me. For a few seconds I could not even breathe. Guests laughed outside as photographers called everyone together for pictures. But all I could hear was the pounding inside my chest. The message came from my supervisor's son, a man named Preston Hale, who had spent the last few months making my career miserable. My hands shook so badly that I almost dropped my phone. I showed the message to my husband, Nolan, expecting him to explode with anger, but instead he smiled in a way I could not understand. He gently closed my fingers around the phone and told me there would be plenty of time to deal with work later. He reminded me that I had waited my entire life for this day, and that no bitter person deserved to steal even 1 minute of it. Something about the confidence in his voice settled my nerves. I handed my phone to my maid of honor, walked outside with Nolan, and forced myself to enjoy every smile, every photograph, and every dance, even though the questions never stopped racing through my mind. Hours later, during our reception, my maid of honor hurried toward me with panic written across her face. She said my phone had been ringing nonstop for nearly an hour. When I looked at the screen, there were more than 100 missed calls. Most were from coworkers, but the name that froze me was Grant Hale, the founder of the architecture firm where I had worked for 2 years. He was also Preston's father. My stomach tightened because I knew something had gone terribly wrong. I stepped into a quiet room and listened to Grant's first voicemail. His voice sounded nothing like the calm executive I had always respected. He said Preston had no authority to fire me, and begged me to return his call immediately. The company had reached a complete standstill because nobody could access the project management system I had built. Every additional message sounded more desperate than the last. Clients were demanding answers, deadlines were collapsing, and nobody knew how to recover. As strange as it sounds, I did not feel fear anymore. I felt calm. For 2 years I had poured my heart into designing a digital system that tracked every project, every permit, every budget adjustment, and every client request. I had begged Preston to let me train the rest of the staff, but he always canceled those sessions because he claimed they wasted money. Now the only person who fully understood the system was the woman he had proudly fired on her wedding day. Nolan found me sitting quietly with my phone resting in my lap. Instead of asking whether I planned to answer the calls, he sat beside me and admitted he had something important to tell me. He worked in the city permit department, and over the past several weeks he had noticed something disturbing. Preston had been submitting altered construction plans that removed important safety features after engineers had already approved them. Nolan had secretly documented every suspicious change, because he believed innocent people could eventually be put at risk. Hearing that made everything fall into place. My firing was no longer just a personal betrayal. It had accidentally protected me from becoming connected to dangerous decisions I never approved. Nolan squeezed my hand and told me we would not spend our wedding chasing phone calls from people who had never respected me. Tomorrow we would leave for our honeymoon exactly as planned. The company could survive 1 week without me, especially after choosing to throw me away. The calls continued throughout our trip. Every morning my voicemail filled with new offers. Grant promised to double my salary, then triple it, then offered company ownership if I would simply come back and rescue the projects. I listened without responding. For the first time in years I realized something important. None of those offers would have existed if Preston had not destroyed the company with his own arrogance. Respect should never arrive only after someone becomes desperate. One evening while watching the sunset beside the ocean, Nolan asked whether I had ever considered starting my own consulting company. He reminded me that my greatest strength was not managing one firm's projects but designing systems that prevented costly mistakes. Cities, engineering firms, and developers all struggled with the same problems. Instead of working for people who underestimated me, I could build standards that protected entire communities. The idea settled into my mind almost instantly. By the time our flight landed back home, I had written the outline for a new business. 3 days later I officially opened Sterling Project Solutions, a consulting company focused on ethical compliance, project management, and construction verification. Less than an hour after the business registration became public, Grant called again. This time I answered, His relief was obvious before he even finished saying my name. He begged me to return, promising that every mistake could still be corrected. I thanked him politely before explaining that I was no longer looking for employment. My company had already signed its first agreement with the city planning department. My responsibility now was to improve review procedures, so unauthorized design changes could never slip through unnoticed again. The silence on the other end of the line lasted several seconds because Grant immediately understood what that meant. If the city reviewed recent submissions under my new system, Preston's actions would eventually be discovered. I ended the call feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time, my future belonged entirely to me instead of a company that had treated loyalty like weakness. I had walked into my wedding believing I was losing everything I had built. Instead, I was beginning something far greater, even if I did not yet realize how dramatically that single text message would reshape every life connected to Crescent architecture.